Hi, this is your Sapnil Bhartiya and welcome to another episode of TFR Let's Talk. And today we have with us for the first time Eric Best, founder and CEO of SoundCommerce. Eric, it's great to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you.
Since it's your debut on the show, so I would love to know a bit about your background and also what led you to the creation of SoundCommerce. Talk about the company, your background, and the idea behind the company.
Maybe we can start with some recent news in the industry that we saw even this week. I have to say I'm shocked that OpenAI is converting to a for-profit model and raising new capital at a $150 billion valuation. And all of this, these recent events in the news and in the industry speak to the potential of AI, generative AI for people going about their daily lives, but also businesses looking to capitalize on data. And so what we're here to talk about is how to make data useful for both humans and machines, or stated slightly differently, how do we handle data in a way that makes AI more reliable in real-world applications? SoundCommerce was founded 5 years ago to solve a data problem for a specific industry, the retail industry. And as we have built our software platform over the course of the last 5 years, we've seen the rise of this cloud data infrastructure, companies like Snowflake and Databricks and services from the likes of Google and AWS and Microsoft, of course. So we are participating in this ecosystem specifically by enabling easier, faster, better, cheaper onboarding of useful data to the cloud and for the purposes of human analysis and AI analysis.
And let's go back to the use case that you mentioned, retailers and to solve. Can you go in specifics that what kind of challenges they were facing to get most out of AI? I mean, now we talk about Gen AI a lot, but talk about, what was the actual hurdle roadblock there? And if you can also talk about your own background, that's what led you to create this company.
Yeah. Well, specifically for our customer and the use cases that we're solving, it's becoming easier to get data unified and landed in places like modern cloud data warehouses for analysis, for activation, for generative AI. But the classic adage, garbage in, garbage out, the data is only as useful as its cleanliness, its preparation, the labeling that defines the meaning of the data. And it's true for both human analysts and generative AI analysts that the data really needs to be understood. It needs to be properly labeled. We talk about the concept of a semantic layer, literally the layer of metadata that defines the data. And this is typically missing when data teams and IT organizations go to try to work on data. In the retail industry, there are very sophisticated analysis that our customers want to perform. They may need to understand inventory forecasting. They might want to better understand the lifetime value of their shopper customers or the performance of their paid media advertising programs. And all of these use cases that I'm describing involve pretty sophisticated queries and modeling logic to build dimensional BI models or analytical models that answer these foundational questions. Did I make money on this order? Will this customer be profitable over time, right? Am I deriving a sufficient return on my marketing investment? These types of questions. So SoundCommerce was created to bridge the gap between data engineering on the one hand, which is building data infrastructure and building data models, and the business practitioners on the other side that are attempting to make good use of the data that's being landed and enabled.
While your roots were in the retail industry, but do you only cater to the retail industry or you also cater to other industries as well?
Yeah, we will serve any industry today. It turns out the technology that we built, while it was very useful for the retail industry in the beginning, those connectors that we've developed can serve other industries, travel, hospitality, consumer goods manufacturers. So we're seeing that the core technology, while it started with a specific set of retail use cases, is really now exploding to serve a much broader set of industries.
As the adoption of I mean, AI has been around forever. We have been using AI for decades. Gen AI has kind of rekindled people's interest in AI once again. Of course, you started this discussion with the latest news from OpenAI, where they are trying to convert from non-profit to for-profit. First of all, depending on who we talk to, a lot of folks say, hey, it's just hype cycle. There are a lot of realistic use cases in the enterprise space, but rest of it is just hype. That's one thing. Second thing is it's also creating a lot of challenges. For example, I mean, my roots and background is in the open source space. We used to respect licenses a lot. For data, Creative Commons was created so you can use the data depending on what kind of license it was released under. You can commercial, derivative, or not. But with Gen AI, they tap into every kind of data. Data privacy can be issue. Of course, copyright can be issue. In Europe, AI Act is there. In the US, California, but they're also doing a lot of things to kind of ensure that Gen AI is not used in wrong way. Beside all these things, when it comes to enterprise customers, what kind of challenges you see they face? Is it about the cost, because you're talking about a lot of data? Is it about privacy, because they don't want third party to tap into their trade secret data? Is it about, once again, regulations? Is it about scale? What kind of challenges you see, whether it's retail or other industries face, when it comes to consuming or leveraging Gen AI technologies?
Yeah, I would say everything that you just mentioned is a consideration for the enterprise in terms of adoption, for sure. AI works really well when three things are true. One, you have an end user that knows how to write an effective prompt, assuming we're talking about generative AI here and not a standalone application. Two, that you're running against a capable and trustworthy model that has been trained well on good data. And three, that prompt and model have access to the right data, and that augmentation data, if you will, has been properly prepared. And it's this third requirement that is most often overlooked when we're talking about AI in the enterprise. I don't know if you've ever asked ChatGPT a question, and what you got back was an answer from 2017 web content. But I think it's pretty well known that ChatGPT is only, the training data is only current through 2021. And so it's like having your generative AI bot stuck in the COVID era. And AI systems are trained on data that is generally meets two criteria. You mentioned this, right? It's either generally publicly available in the public domain, or more recently, it has been purchased by one of these modeling entities through a license model that you mentioned. So I thought it was very interesting that it's been a few quarters ago now that the Wall Street Journal sold their entire back catalog to OpenAI for $100 million. So OpenAI now has access, paid licensed access to Wall Street Journal content for the purposes of training. But the problem with that training data is that it is old. It is generally aged data. And so enterprises, in order to make generative AI work well, need to overcome this training data limitation. They need timely data that is recent, and they also need the assurance that if they analyze their own private enterprise data, that they will not be compromising the privacy and security of that data. And you mentioned that as well. And so AI follows this process that we call augmentation. And we talked earlier about the standalone cloud providers or standalone data cloud providers. It is becoming much easier to expose my private enterprise data to a generative AI model. Snowflake and Google and AWS all provide this capability. But there is this age-old problem that we've discussed. with augmentation data sets that if a human can't understand the data because it's not properly labeled, there's no column headers, it came from some legacy on-prem system that's 20 years old, we can't expect a large language model or small language model to understand the data either. And this is really the problem that SoundCommerce is set out to solve. We have launched a new product into market called Reactor. It's described at reactordata.com. And Reactor has a very simple purpose, and that is to create a metadata layer that describes data, ascribes meaning to data sets, so that that data is more easily understood by humans and machines. It's a translation layer, if you will, that defines the data for shared and downstream understanding.
Can you just go a bit in depth and talk about Reactor as well? Of course, the technical aspect, and also, is it a product? Is it a project? Is it a service? How customers, users can use it?
Yeah. Well, Reactor is a SaaS offering. It's available through a fixed license fee, and it's delivered as a cloud service to our customers. It is natively integrated today with 2 cloud data warehouses, Google BigQuery and Snowflake, and we're in the process of building support for a 3rd flavor of data cloud infrastructure known as Databricks. And basically what Reactor does is it picks up raw data from source systems. Those systems could be modern SaaS APIs, they could be legacy enterprise data warehouses sitting on-prem within a corporate infrastructure. They could be flat files or spreadsheets. The source of data can vary wildly. We pick up the data, and like tools that traditionally have been called ETL or ELT tools, extract, transform, and load, we're moving the data from the source to the data warehouse where it can be further analyzed by people and generative AI models. But what's different about Reactor is that in the process of transferring the data from source to a data warehouse table, we are applying this semantic layer to provide shared understanding and meaning of the data on the way in. And you mentioned cost earlier. You know, the cost of data warehouse compute and storage is on the rise. Now, for every gigabyte or terabyte of data you're processing, costs are generally going down over time. But because there has been such a proliferation of data volume, most companies see their cloud computing bill growing month over month. And one of the benefits of the Reactor architecture is that by handling the dirty work, if you will, the plumbing of the data and this foundational work of labeling and mapping the data properly for semantic understanding, we take that low level, call it like bronze and silver data prep work out of the cloud data warehouse. And thereby we reduce the cost of cloud computing from the data warehouse for our enterprise customers.
Can you also talk about the cost aspect of GenAI and data? Also, depending on, I don't want to get into the whole data lake, data warehouse, but egress, ingress clause, that can also add up. So how do you help companies kind of keep the cost low? Or this is out of the scope of what SoundCommerce does?
No, I think the simplest explanation is that we permanently log the raw data that we collect upstream of the data warehouse. And we give our customers the ability to electively move just the data that they need into the data warehouse for further analysis. So we effectively provide a filtering mechanism that allows organizations to be more discerning in terms of the amount of data that they load into the data warehouse and the kinds of data that they decide to process there. And the great thing about this concept of immutable logging, permanent storage of the raw data upstream, is that if it turns out years from now that you need a data set that you did not think about at the time, we effectively are future-proofing the data set because we have that original copy of the raw data that our customers can go back and access and refer to when they need it. And so we talk often about this concept of future-proofing. No one can know the specifics of the data requirements they'll have out into the future. But it becomes very easy if you have a local copy of the raw data stored somewhere to access that down the road when you need it.
Earlier, you're talking about prompt, and with Gen AI specifically, that does become a challenge because you need to know the right question to get the right answer. That was not the case, right? So, can you also talk about how how do engineering teams or IT teams, or you can talk about dev teams or operators team, how are they looking at these prompts, and how are you making it easier so that users don't have to learn those prompts? It should be part of their workflow.
Well, we don't specifically provide prompt engineering tools, but there's a very important concept at the center of everything that we've been talking about here today. Let's call it a data dictionary. When you go to write your prompt in a business setting, and let's say that you're interested in the profitability of your retail business, which is a great use case where we started at SoundCommerce a few years ago. If you say contribution profit, and I say contribution profit, how do we know that those phrases mean the same thing in the context of our business? And more importantly, how will the generative AI, LLM, or SLM know what contribution profit means when I use that phrase in my prompt? And the value of the semantic layer is that we are defining terms like contribution profit in a universal way so that you understand it, I understand it, and the generative AI model understands it. Contribution profit might be revenue minus cost of goods sold, minus variable marketing costs, minus variable shipping costs. But then there's the nuance of our specific business. Do we measure profit before or after discounts? Do we measure profit before or after cancellations and customer returns? And so you end up with this very extensive list of detailed refinements, if you will, on any particular concept or topic that is important to our business. And we want to define those things in advance so that when a prompt engineer or a non-technical business end user goes to write the prompt, they have confidence that the words that they are using have specific meaning that will be well understood by the model.
When companies, of course, a lot of companies are still in the early stage of embracing, evaluating AI, Gen AI, as they are evaluating, as they are bringing their AI strategies, how they should prepare for it, because once again, it takes a lot of effort internally to change. I don't want to get into the whole debate of cultural change because that's what we talk a lot about, but from a strategic point of view, how they should look at it.
Yeah, I tend to think about things like this in terms of frameworks, and extremely oversimplified. There are applications that are AI enabled that you can put in the hands of your business decision makers. In retail in particular, I would say most of the MarTech providers, the software application providers that are solving problems around digital marketing use cases, are now embedding artificial intelligence into their standalone applications. So for something very specific, like a question, say, where should I allocate the next dollar of digital marketing budget for my business for maximum return on investment, we would expect that question over time will be answered by standalone applications. Let's set that aside for a minute and talk about the other path. The other path is this concept that I want to build data capability. I want to embark upon digital transformation as an enterprise. And how do I get started in that down that path? Well, we would argue that the most important thing that you can do is to get your data unified in one place where it is generally available to the generative AI models. We talked about this earlier. SoundCommerce is not going to compete with AWS or Google or Snowflake, Microsoft, the combination of these enterprise giants that are investing hundreds of billions of dollars in generative AI capability. And what's true about all of those names that I just mentioned is they are providing native connectivity between the data warehouse and the generative AI model. So we don't have to solve that problem. And business enterprises don't have to solve that problem. The problem they have to solve is how to get the data into the data warehouse so that it is then natively accessible by these tools that all of these cloud giants are developing as we speak.
Tell about your background and what led to the creation of the company.
Yeah. So the inspiration for SoundCommerce really came from three different places. My early background is actually at Amazon, where I was present more years ago than I like to say out loud. But I was there when Amazon was first experimenting with and launching the early version of their cloud services, Amazon Web Services. And so some of my understanding of cloud infrastructure came from the early days that I spent at Amazon. More recently, there were two key experiences that kind of drove the launch of SoundCommerce. One is I spent some time at a customer data platform provider in Seattle called Amperity. And Amperity is a well-known, well-funded, successful company in this customer data platform space. And I observed that with the rise of cloud infrastructure, the CDPs, as they're known, these customer data platforms, were on a collision course with the more open cloud infrastructure that was emerging in the market. There's a phrase that the market uses today now, composable, which sort of speaks to the ability of an IT team or a company to assemble the various pieces they need to build data capability. And so when we founded SoundCommerce, we wanted to make sure that we were on the right side of history, the composability side from a strategic standpoint, so that we were not competing directly with the likes of Snowflake and Databricks as we built the company. And the final piece of inspiration is I had the opportunity right before SoundCommerce was founded to go run a consumer apparel brand in Southern California. It was one of the first times in my career where I had stepped out of the technology industry and into an operator role within a consumer brand that was constrained by physical inventory and warehouse space and store footprint and overseas manufacturer supplier relationships. And I discovered very quickly how hard it is to successfully run a retail business. There are so many moving parts, and it's so hard to understand what's happening from one moment to the next. That I decided on the basis of that experience to start the company, SoundCommerce.
We are in October, reaching year end. Talk a bit about what kind of plans you have for this year and next year.
Yeah. We spoke earlier about how Reactor is moving beyond the retail vertical industry. And at this moment, we are just now beginning to onboard customers that fall outside of that particular vertical. So we're very excited about a number of initiatives that we have underway. One is just to expand the scope of the data models that we enable and the connectors that we provide for new industries. That, of course, involves some new marketing and sales investments that we're making to move beyond our original core market. And then on the technology front, I think we see an opportunity as we're enabling data to be better understood, not just to enable the augmentation use cases that you and I have talked about today, but eventually to move our data capability into training and fine-tuning of the models themselves. And in a sense, the work that's required in order to make that expansion into additional generative AI use cases is quite iterative. It's fairly incremental in terms of the technology that we've already built today. So those are some of the things that I'm excited about.
Eric, once again, thank you so much for joining me today. Talk about the company, of course, the whole space and how you folks are solving some of those problems. It was great talking to you today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Swapnil. Really enjoyed it.